reaching on the podium.
I'm a fourth generation Kalamazoo resident, Kalamazoo Promise recipient, and been a long time activist in Kalamazoo. Do I have a timer?
No,
Okay,
you're fine.
thank you, because I'm coming with a little bit of urgency, and so not having the timer is helpful. Fourth generation Kalamazoo resident, Kalamazoo Promise recipient, on my father's side, and so a little bit of context. And I know you all know this, you're historians, you're Kalamazoo residents. There was an article the other day that talked about the Kalamazoo being one of the fastest shrinking cities. Y'all may have seen that. If you didn't, check that out. And so I'm giving that context because I feel like now historic preservation is more important than ever. And as a fourth generation Kalamazoo resident who is also a father of two, and who plans to stay in Kalamazoo for a while, I have some kind of urgent historic preservation asks for help. And so I'm coming to you all with maybe hope of some ideas or some directions, or some creative ways to support this, what I think is an awesome project. And so there's a few of them, and I'm gonna start with one. And so in this packet that's going around is my great-grandmother, great-grandfather, and my father and grandfather. And so I don't want to be too long-winded, but since I don't have a timer, I'm gonna give the story. My great-great-great-grandfather, Beverly Williams, escaped slavery from Kentucky and made his way to Saline, Michigan in about the 1860s. He gave birth to my great-grandfather, who's pictured in here with my great-grandmother, Henry Williams, who married my great-grandmother, Lulu Margaret Williams, better known as Commissioner Lulu Margaret Williams. They purchased a home in Kalamazoo in 1915, located at 716 Pioneer Street. So these were some of the first African Americans to live in this part of town, right? So we're talking about the Vine neighborhood. And so this is a home that's been in our family for generations. And we lost the home a few years ago due to some issues that often happens in specifically Black and brown communities when it comes to home ownership. It was a heartbreak, literally. My 75-year-old mother lives across the street from this home, and I grew up across the street from it. And so the historical, cultural relevance of this home is that my great-grandmother, a Black woman in 1915, better known as Commissioner Lulu Margaret Williams, bought this home. Commissioner Lulu Margaret Williams was a part of a publication of a statewide book that's featured here. It's called Negroes in Michigan History in this book, but the other term is called the Michigan Manual for Freedmen's Progress. It's archived within WMU. And my grandmother was the representative for Kalamazoo to put this publication together. And what it was a commemoration of 50 years post-emancipation and looking at the status of Negroes in Michigan, in Kalamazoo. And so my grandmother in the house that I'm speaking of is featured in this book. And it's been a great kind of family heirloom, but also I think a historical cultural stop in Kalamazoo. And so this has been a part of kind of history tours. We have a lot of kind of urban legends around pretty well-known folks such as W.E. Du Bois stopping by this home when he was in town. And so a lot of family history, but also some broader kind of community statewide cultural relevance. And so I'm in the process of purchasing this home back as a personal family project, but also as carrying on the legacy of a great Black woman in Kalamazoo who happens to be my great-grandmother, Commissioner Lulu Margaret Williams. And so I'm coming to you all asking for any help or support or direction. I've talked with my good friend Steve Walsh, director of the Vine Neighborhood Association, who very much well knows the cultural, historical value of this home. And I want to be in it with my children, which would make 5 generations of African American residents in this home. And I would like to see what type of support we can also gain to make this maybe a historic site in Kalamazoo, just knowing that Commissioner Lulu Margaret Williams bought this home in 1915 and that it lived on through generations. And so kind of coming to you with the plea. And I know that you all in the city values racial equity in preserving some of the cultural history in Kalamazoo, specifically as it relates to African Americans. And I'm fortunate to come from a family that I have many stories and legacies that I hope to carry on for my children, but also for our community. And so this home at 716 Pioneer Street is a project, and I'm just wanting to come to you all. I know I talked with Luis some, and he kind of made clear around some of just the protocols around what you all support and what you don't. And so I'm just coming to you all saying, hey, I'm a fourth generation Kalamazoo resident. I have an awesome idea for a historic cultural preservation project, and I'm wondering if y'all can help me think outside of the box. And so I'm currently in communication with the owner of this home, and we are working on purchasing it back. And so again, I know it's coming from kind of I, right? Anybody would love to buy their great-grandmother's home. But I want to make sure that this is not just a selfish cause, although it is, because my 75-year-old mother lives across the street, who I would love to raise my children across the street from. But this is also, a very much historic site in Michigan, in Kalamazoo, specifically speaking for African-American families. And so I would love any type of help or direction, and this is really just a plea. This is an individual who's a fourth-generation Kalamazoo resident who's given my all to the city, and who's just trying to hold on to this piece of legacy for my family, but also for our city and our state, because this was a state commissioner, Lulu Margaret Williams. And so I thank you, Luis, for just hearing me. There's a lot of urgency in my voice, as you can tell, because African Americans lose homes like this so much. And it means a lot to me, but I think it's a great kind of cultural, historic project in Kalamazoo. And so I just wanted to put that in front of you. I know that's a lot to just drop on you, and I have more, but if there's any type of thinking outside of the box or any opportunities or things that come to you all's minds around connection points, like, of course I would love some funding, but it's not just about that. Like, connections to any resources is really what I need, or supportive individuals. I'm also a historian in Kalamazoo. I worked for years at SHARE, Society for History and Racial Equity. So again, this is like personal, but it's also, I have given a lot of my time and energy, as have you all, to preserve the African American history in Southwest Michigan. Another site, and I know there's some conversations within the Northside Business Development District, is, again, I told you I'm a fourth generation Kalamazoo resident. So this home that I'm talking about has 4 generations in it. My father, who was born in 1945 in Kalamazoo, Michigan, David Johnson, also grew up in this home. I should note that his father, my grandfather, Mabry Johnson, who was also pictured in the Gazette article, was a part of the Great Migration, like many other African American folks. And so he, at the age of 13, left Okolona, Mississippi, fled Okolona, Mississippi, like many other African American families, and found his way in Kalamazoo in around the 1920s. And he found my grandmother, who is Lulu Margaret Williams and Henry Williams' daughter, the baby in the picture. And so I give that context because, again, this is all people who kind of spent time in this place, and there's a story to be told about this home. My father, like I mentioned, who grew up in the home, was a civil rights activist in Kalamazoo. He led a well-known boycott called the Van Avery's Drugstore Boycott, which is located, as you all know, at the Ecumenical Senior Center. And so as a senior at Kalamazoo Central, being the president of the NAACP, him along with other youth, Walter Jones and Lois Fisher, went into, I don't have to give you the whole story about Van Avery's because y'all may or may not know, but basically went into Van Avery's and asked for applications and were denied. And a summer-long boycott pursued. And so not protest, but boycott. And it's really, and so this is my father here, and so it's really, again, a moment in time, and a place in time that tells a story about race and racism and the fight and struggle for racial equality in Kalamazoo. And so I just took some pictures with my children there, but the point I'm trying to get at is this is an important moment in time that I would love to help tell the story of, again, as a fourth generation son of one of the lead organizers, but also the place itself. So the Ecumenical Senior Center, as you all may or may not be aware, is going to be torn down, and they're going to build up a new center, which is great, super awesome. My grandfather spent time at the Ecumenical Senior Center. The picture that you see in the Gazette is at the Ecumenical Senior Center with my father and grandfather. And so I would love to see what we could do or any support to make that a historic site, or at least a sign or something to acknowledge the Van Avery's drugstore boycott and the story, so we can tell our youth and future generations. And I don't have to go around and tell it, but we can have a plaque or something that's long-standing. And so I'm laying a lot on y'all, and you can tell that there's a sense of urgency. I know that you all have protocols and operate in certain ways and manners, and I'm just asking that maybe there's some type of support, direction, or even some really outside of the box thinking, because this is an urgent matter. We don't have opportunities like this to preserve legacies in Kalamazoo like this, and so I would plead to y'all to maybe consider what the Historic Preservation Commission can do to support this cultural historic project. Or both of these, right? I'm coming with multiple, and I've actually got another one too. But I'll just let y'all know. Y'all may be interested. So I told you my mother grew up across the street from this house at 716 Pioneer Street. I grew up in that home. It just so happens to be the home that Tim Allen lived in. Tim Allen, the tool-man Taylor, he went to Western and got busted for some drugs at one point. But anyways, I grew up in the home where that he lived in Kalamazoo, and so we've had like the A&E channel stop by and film my mother's home, which is located at 715 Pioneer Street. And so that's just maybe another cool thing, but that's not as urgent as some of this other stuff. And so I know y'all appreciate history and preserving history. Thank you for hearing me. I could keep going, but I know and think y'all may have other business. But you let me know, because I will keep going as long as you let me. But I again thank you before I leave. So, fourth generation Kalamazoo resident historian. So I also want to invite you all to the Kalamazoo Valley Museum. Starting in July, I will have. I don't want to say I, because I'm not trying to make it too much about me, right? But we will have a small display at the Kalamazoo Valley History Museum. So I've been talking with Julie, the director of exhibits there. We're going to have a small display talking about my 4 or 5 generations of African Americans in Kalamazoo, stemming from great-great-great-grandfather who escaped slavery in Kentucky, made his way to Saline, grandfather, part of the Great Migration, made his way to Michigan. We have oral history of that. My father, who was very much a part of the civil rights movement in Kalamazoo, who happened to be drafted to Vietnam War 2 years after the Van Avery's drugstore boycott, right? Couldn't get a job in his own city in Kalamazoo, but could be drafted. And I have pictures, many of them. Anyways, I won't keep going, because I could literally go all day. But you sense the urgency, you sense what I hope can be kind of humble pride in terms of wanting to preserve not just my family's history, but a serious legacy of African Americans in Kalamazoo. And so I really hope and plead that you all will support me in Kalamazoo and future generations in preserving these stories, because Kalamazoo is right now the fastest shrinking city in our nation. And so we need to preserve this history now more than ever. I'm super proud of myself for not breaking down. And I'm thankful for y'all for giving me way more than 3 minutes. And I'm not looking for answers right now. I would love all of you all's contacts. Luis has shared with me that, y'all have things in place and operate certain ways. And so I want to honor that. But I also want to challenge us to think outside of the box. We don't have opportunities to preserve stories like this often. In the way things are going, we might not have those opportunities very much in the future, because people are leaving Kalamazoo. And so I hope you hear my plea in my heart, and I hope you consider ways to support either amongst your role here or outside. I won't share the donation link quite yet. I do have plans, again, to go to our local foundations, who I've worked with many times as well. I would love to see what our Foundation for Excellence could potentially do to support. I know we have leaders in our city who really value housing. So when we talk about intergenerational housing, I think there's opportunity here. And so part of me is like, I'll leave it for questions, but that's not how this works. So thank you all for listening. If there's an opportunity.
No, I have a question.
Okay, if it works like that,
Yeah?
Yes, please.
So first, no, I didn't know they were going to tear down the Ecumenical Center, so that's interesting to know.
Yeah.
Second thing, I think it could be a possibility that we could look at something to help with the plaque at the Ecumenical Center, but you probably want to come to us with a bid, or not a bid, but a price of what are your ideas of what it should look like, and how much it would cost, and what words would you, because I don't know if they charge them plaques about a minute, about a letter, I don't know. So if you come to us with that,
thank you.
We'll be able to at least look at it, and then we could, make that determination. But I think that would be an awesome idea. This is just me talking,
right?
But I'm just giving you maybe ideas of how you could potentially get some kind of funding for your project at the Ecumenical Center.
Thank you.
Regarding your home, the home at 716 Pioneer is in Britain.
I know.
Okay, thank you.
Feel free to drive past it.
Okay. So. I think that's an awesome project that you have. I guess my question would be, what is your end goal for the property? Because you said in one instance you were going to turn it into a museum, and then in the next instance you said you were going to live in it. So I'm confused.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I mean.
So you gonna live in it while the people walk in and look at your house?
To a certain extent. So again, like I said, this home has already been a part of local Southwest Michigan historical African American tours. So this has been a stop, and it's served in such a sense before. I hope to also get a plaque there. But yes, being a fourth generation resident, I have acquired a lot of documents, some of which I'm going to show at the museum starting in July. That'll go through the end of the year. And so I feel it my duty to continue to share and preserve those stories. And so, there's going to be limits of how folks just, enter and view the home, and that's not all figured out yet. But I do kind of mean both and. I mean, with limits, right? This is an ongoing project, but yeah.
Then again, I would ask, and this is just me again talking, I would ask you write up a proposal and let us know how you plan to use that property. There are some grants out there, if you're using it as a museum for public use. I mean, there's grants out there, but the best thing for you to do now is to write up what your ideas are.
Okay.
So you have it on paper and outline every detail down to the doorbell. And then present that and see if we're able to assist. May not be this year, but maybe next year. I don't know. But yeah, if we had something in writing so we could read about what your ideas are, that's just my thought. That might help.
Definitely.
And I'm going to
Thank you for that.
Interject here and redirect a little bit. Thank you for coming and speaking with us and stuff. So, I emailed you briefly earlier today just about what it looks like to get stuff on the agenda and then all that kind of stuff. So we'd be more than happy if you want to present a report to us with some of the suggestions that Lene gave you in July. And then it would be part of the actual public record too, so that would make it public. And then we didn't give you 3 minutes today. I gave you more than 3 minutes. But generally, generally, the public comment section is not meant to be a discourse between the public and stuff. So I am going to redirect, so we're not having the discourse with the public anymore, and I'm going to turn it over to the commissioners to speak.
Gotcha.
Just so you know.
Yep.
But if you wanted to have time for that, and if you wanted to give a report where there could be an opportunity for discourse, we can certainly look at that for July. So I do really appreciate you coming to talk to us, and I'm glad that you showed up tonight. It was a great surprise for me when I saw your email, and then we usually don't have a lot of visitors at our meetings, so it was nice to have you.
Well, now I'm interested, and I'm like, let me pay attention more. But thank you greatly for just hearing me out. My email is on that paper, so as an individual, if any of you all feel the inkling to reach out, that would be great, and I'll work on getting on the agenda. Again, there is some urgency, right? I'm talking to a seller right now who's trying to get money out of this home, and so and once we reacquire the home, there will by all means be ongoing preservation needs. And so thank you all. Thank you for giving me way more time than allotted. And thank you for some of the feedback.
So I want to open it up to some of the other commissioners to see if they have any comments on the comments.
Yeah, first, thank you for coming and sharing this with us. This was very interesting. My initial reaction is like I think there's more that we can do if you have the property already. Like there's more resources that we can connect you with if you need things like, if there's things that need to be fixed or repaired or things like that. I don't know. I don't really have a good feel for what we are able to do before that. But I do think that is something that we could do. We could connect you with some people and resources once you are in possession. That's my initial thought, but I might be wrong about that. But
Anybody else?
Just kind of echoing, I would be interested to hear more about the plans. It sounds like if you already have an exhibit at the Valley Museum and you wanted that to be a permanent record in Kalamazoo, maybe we could look at getting that into the local history room at the library or something. So I think there'd be more steps if there's already so much stuff gathered together. And you said there's oral history already, which is great. So I think there's a future for at least preserving the history. I don't know about the property, like he's saying, but.
Anybody else? So, again, I just want to say thank you, Jacob, for coming out today. And I think that when we're looking at this, we need to think about it in phases, obviously. The acquisition is probably not something that the Historic Preservation Commission helps out with, is the acquisition of property. I think if we look at the other side of that coin, the acquisition is one stage in a long road that you have ahead of you. And I know just from my everyday work that a house is a lot of work, right? So once the property is acquired, I think that there's things that we can look at and say, hey, you're going to have to follow some historic rules now. And I think that the Historic District Commission, the Historic Preservation Commission, or I can certainly look at those properties and, say, here's the things that I would fix first, here are the things I wouldn't fix first, here are the best ways to fix these things. I think that those directions can certainly assist once the property's been acquired.
There's some tax credits as well that we can kind of point you towards.
Yeah.
For some of the work that's being done.
Yep. And those will certainly help. And I think that another thing to consider and look at too is when we're talking about, I just want us to all wrap our head around this. When we're talking about plaques, the first thing we need to do is figure out who's going to write the plaque, right? That's the first hurdle. Again, if we're looking at projects in terms of phases, who's going to collect the research, who's going to vet all the research, who's going to kind of triangulate all the facts to make sure that we have everything, and then who is actually going to write the plaque, which might sound like, oh, it's not that bad, but it's taking what I'm guessing. It sounds like you have, tomes of information and distilling that down into, I don't know how many words, but it's not a lot of words. That's hurdle number one, and it's not an insurmountable hurdle, right? That's very doable. The next hurdle is the payment for the plaques, which they do cost money. The green ones from the state of the Michigan cost money, and that's the responsibility of the person generally who's going to be putting it up to pay for it and maintain said plaque. I just want to spitball a number. I think it's around $4,000 for one of the large ones. So it definitely costs a little bit of money, but again, that's not insurmountable.
Also, for putting this on the property of the Ecumenical Senior Center, they should desire this as well.
Yes. And I think that I was just speaking broadly about plaques, but yes, and we can get into the minutia of some of those details at a later time, so we don't need to kind of flounder right now with all those details. And I think the last thing that I'll leave you with is that I would be combing the National Parks website, and I'd be combing the State Historic Preservation Office website, just to look for grant opportunities. I know the underrepresented communities grant here in Michigan, and then also the civil rights grant here in Michigan are ones that would help look towards nomination is generally what they would achieve, so National Register nomination, or at least getting the work done for those. There's some complexities in that, so I think that we would need to have further conversations about that, but those are other ways to get the nominations. So looking at the Michigan Historic Preservation Network's website as well, they have a directory that maybe could point you in the direction of some other resources. These are all things that you could use and tap into. that's what I can offer, obviously, right now. And I know that we're going to set up some time next week to talk too. So those are some of the things off the top of my head that I can think of. And again, I just want to thank you for coming in and speaking with us. And I'm sure that we'll hear from you again soon. And I know that we're going to take some time next week or this week. I'm sorry that I can't remember, but to talk. So we'll set up some time.
Great. Were there any other previously submitted public comments?
There were not.
All right, so that brings us to E on our agenda, which is reports, starting with the June financial report.
Woohoo, this is riveting, right? So I don't think that there's a lot of exciting stuff here to look at in the actual financial report. It's kind of a situation normal. I think that there's always going to be a little bit of delay between what's going on when the money's getting spent, right? I think that that's one that we might encumber the money to be spent at one point, but then it gets getting spent at another time. Again, I'm asking you guys the big picture stuff, but I think that we really need to think going into the next month, and I'm going to be having a budget meeting about what's our fiscal approach and what's our financial plan, right? So in the past, we were looking at numbers that were encumbered to us, and this year I had to kind of throw together the budget in a pretty short notice, and I didn't know exactly what was going to happen. We didn't have a lot of money left, so I vastly reduced the amount of money that I thought we were going to bring in, and it was still high. I mean, we haven't made any money this year. I don't think that's a surprise to any of us, right? I think we need to address that and think about that. So in the future, if we're going to say, like, we're not going to make any money, then we're not going to be spending any money. We have to think about the money that we're going to be spending. This is going to tie us into the O'Connor budget report too, so I might just make it a seamless segue here, if you will. But we don't need to do anything about it today, but I kind of want to start to plant some seeds because I'm also going to be proposing some spending of money later. But I just want us to think about when we're looking at this, we know that we haven't made any money, but the benefit of having the money at the city is that I can use it at the drop of a hat if I need to, once you guys give me the approval. The Kalamazoo Community Foundation, great place to have the money, but we need to do a lot of forward planning on that, and sometimes there's things that crop up that we might not be able to plan for, and the money is going to be dispersed around the 15th of the month, let's just say, for my naivete. So things that come up like reimbursements or things that come up like food for events, we need to be planning, and sometimes we won't know the month in advance when it's going to happen. I think it would be smart for us, and it's your guys' prerogative when we're not going to vote on anything today. Again, I'm just trying to plant the seed. This was talked about a lot before, and it was before a lot of you guys were on this commission, that I think that we should be looking at moving some sum of money from the O'Connor Fund back to the city as pretty much a contingency. It helps us better forecast the books, so we would know if we brought an influx of cash in that we would have that much, and then it would be there with the city. This is what was heavily advocated for when we transferred $25,000 away from the city's account into the O'Connor Fund, and it was not heeded by this commission, and again, that's the prerogative of the commission, and it's not necessarily this iteration of the commission, but it's probably me selfishly saying this, but having the money at the city, I think, is beneficial to have there because of the way that we can use it and plan around that. Just a thought, and I just want to plant it, and that brings us into the O'Connor budget for the next round here. This one's not as big and it doesn't have as many numbers, I know. So the current available balance for O'Connor 1 is 14 grand, 14,968.25, and the O'Connor 2 is $57,811.29. You guys can go back and compare that to last month's if you'd like. It's certainly a drop from last month's in the endowment fund. Another reason that I say that we might want to move some of the money is that while we're not gaining interest on it, it's also not volatile, and it sits. I know that we don't ever need to worry about this money going away, but we just know that it would be there. I'm by no means a finance person, but you can compare it to last month's and see the difference between the two. So that's the financials.
Do you have a number that you're proposing we transfer into the city budget?
I'm trying to read your guys' faces right now, and it's very difficult for me to throw out a number because I'm not reading a lot from you all right now. But, you know, I think that between 5 and 10 grand would be good. The only reason is because, you know, a couple things, I guess. When we're making the votes, and I think that I've done a good job, but maybe not good enough, we've usually iterated that we want it to come out of the O'Connor Fund when it does come out of the O'Connor Fund, right? In other instances, it's just going to come out of the city fund if it wasn't vocalized like that, because I can't, in good conscience or ethically, reach out to you guys after a meeting and say, like, hey, so did you mean this one or that one? It helps me be able to balance the books to know that we're going to have a $10,000 revenue stream come in. 10,000 is an arbitrary number, so we could just say X dollar if we wanted to. And then we would be able to plan down pretty well our expenses, and it would not be a yearly thing, I don't think. I think that 10 or 5, whatever number we choose, would be able to float us for a while. We've spent, I think, $3,000 this year, so I mean, I think that we could look at those things. We're at a new phase, and I know I'm belaboring your question a little bit, but a new phase for the HBC, I think, right now, because we do not have a revenue stream, and I think that's a relatively novel thing for this commission. The 25 grand that we transferred over to the O'Connor Fund, I'm pretty sure came mostly from the Hidden Kalamazoo tour. So this is not good or bad. This is what it is right now. But I want to make sure that you know, we have a better handle, I think, on the finances right now than we ever have, on the finances. I want to make sure that we continue down the right path with the finances and we're doing the right thing. And that's your guys' obviously prerogative.
So something about you're talking about the balance goes down. I'm looking at last month's right now, and the net assets in O'Connor 2 was 420,902. So we're down $18,000. The current available balance has not moved.
No.
That
yes.
is the same amount.
Yes.
So, and I'm assuming anything that we pull over will come from that current available balance and not from the net assets.
Correct.
So I'm not sure that is the volatility is not something I'm necessarily concerned about. But I do take your point that we should have some sort of spendable balance with the city that we can use ad hoc rather than having to go through jump through hoops. I think that's a good idea. I don't think the volatility is an argument that needs to be made in order to justify that.
So I thought we had this conversation, I don't know, a year or two ago. And the response specifically from Pam was that's why we had $5,000 to keep in the city account, because we haven't done anything. So the question is, why would we increase to 10,000? And we historically don't have any expenditures, especially in the past couple of years, significant. The other thing is, by keeping the bulk of the money in the O'Connor Fund, it grows interest. So if you take out that extra $5,000, you've lost interest on that $5,000. So I thought we had this conversation, like I said, a year or so ago. And that's why we agreed to just keep the $5,000 in the account for the city.
Yep.
We had the conversation in reverse.
Yep.
Right.
So, and go ahead, Catherine. Sorry.
It's fine. You can go.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're going to say the same thing, I think. So
I'm going to address the comments in the reverse that you brought them up. First, I think that, we're not gaining interest in, if I remember correctly, on the current available balance, we're gaining interest on the net assets. So again, I think that is another thing to consider, is that if it drops down, then you're gaining less money on it, but you're right, it's kind of a moot point. If we moved money from the current available balance, it would not affect the amount of interest that we're gaining on it at all, because that money is again, this is my understanding, frozen, because it's already taken out to be spendable. Catherine is correct. We had this conversation in reverse that we are going to be transferring funds from the city account back over to the O'Connor Fund when it got to a certain threshold, not from the O'Connor Fund back over to the city. I also say this in all kindness, but Pam is not a member of the commission who has a vote either. So I want you guys to remember that it is your guys' votes that are going to be moving forward with what happens and what does not happen. And finally, I think that we now understand better the finances, and I remember that was kind of a tumultuous time when we were looking like, we're going to move forward, we're going to move this much money over, and then we found out we didn't even have that much money, so we couldn't move any over. So we did have this conversation, but it was the opposite flow of cash going from the city to the O'Connor Fund instead of from the O'Connor Fund to the city.
Yeah, I think, yes, that we should be topping this up. Maybe it is $5,000. We can decide on some sort of threshold. Maybe it's 10. It could be either. Yeah, we aren't missing out on interest by pulling it from the spendable funds. If we were pulling down from the endowment balance, that would impact it, but that's not what we're talking about. So yeah, I think that this is a good idea to top up this so we just have some base level amount that we can use.
Right, and just to, yeah, I agree, and just to kind of clarify for context, since we, it's been a while, and Kayla's newer on the commission as well, and I think a lot of the discussion about kind of money transfers were based on this false idea that we had, that we were getting like an annual budget, like a allotment from the city every year, and that was the city fund, and then the O'Connor Fund was different, and so we thought, I'm not sure why we thought this, but for years we thought that we were getting like money from the city every year, and turns out that is not the case. And so the fact that we've now we had all this revenue coming in from the book sales, from the Kalamazoo tours, and then we just spent it down. But we did do like a rather large transfer of funds over to O'Connor, but we did that with the understanding that we were going to be getting, influxes of cash from the city, and that never happened. That will not happen, and so now we've just spent it all down. So that's the context. But yeah, no, I agree that it makes sense. I'm not sure, we can think about what that number is. I mean, if $3,000 is a typical budget spendable, per year, we can think like 5, maybe. I don't know. We can talk about what the amount is, but I think it's reasonable to have funds in the account to spend as needed.
I thought we'd agreed it was 5,000.
So we did agree. We agreed that once the city fund went above $5,000, that anything over the $5,000 would be transferred to the O'Connor Fund, I believe, in quarterly intervals. However, we made that decision at the time in which we thought that we were getting revenue or budget from the city. So we thought we were getting money from the city every year, which is why that would then exceed $5,000. But now we are no longer getting money from the city, and we also no longer generate revenue. So we are not in danger at this moment of going above $5,000. We're going the other way now. Does that make sense?
What do we need 10,000? I guess I don't know, but I don't understand why we're increasing it to 10,000.
So we're not talking about the same thing either. We're talking about moving the money out of the O'Connor Fund into the city. And before we were talking about moving the money from the city into the O'Connor Fund.
So how much are you proposing to move out of the O'Connor Fund?
So I'm not going to propose anything because it's not my place to do. So I think that the smart next decision would be to look at probably, and this would be a finance subcommittee thing that we can do along with myself, and look at the finances of the O'Connor Fund over the last 3 to 5 years, see how much money we gain in interest yearly, and then we could determine what amount would be appropriate, because we don't want to make sure that we're exceeding that interest, but we could say, hey, if we're making, I don't even want to say numbers, but we could take a percentage of that and move it over and know that we're still going to be gaining a bunch of interest, and this would be something that wouldn't really matter at the end of the day.
So if I'm reading this correctly, we have just over $3,600 in our account with the city right now.
No, we probably have $1,400.
Okay, $1,400.
That's not going to be on there.
Okay, there's stuff that's happened since this.
This is the expenditure report. So we've spent probably $3,600. We started with about 48.
All right, still.
This is always kind of a wrestling match for me to navigate this as well. But buying the MHPN stuff was not cheap this year. Frankly, it was about $2,000, and then we just do have little other encumbrances that we are going to pick up, like paying for the venue for the Awards of Merit, and paying for the Jimmy John sandwiches for the grant opening. stuff like that, so.
Okay, so even if we were to, let's say we have $1,500 and we want to hit $5,000, $3,500 out of the counter fund is not going to do anything, like from an interest perspective. I mean, even if we earn 10% on that, that's $350.
So that is only to replace the money that we've spent so far.
Correct.
Okay, I agree that we can take it back up to the threshold of 5,000 and pull it out of the O'Connor Fund. But I don't understand what we need $10,000 for. That's where I'm thrown for a loop.
Well, that's where I think we need to look at our spending a little bit and make sure that a $5,000 budget for a year is going to be sufficient.
And I think to this, we don't need to have the discussion at this point probably because it's going to be immaterial and we're not going to be making a vote. I think that we can look at it later when we actually have numbers and it might be a more productive and beneficial conversation. The numbers that I threw out were just arbitrary and kind of made up, but I just wanted to float the ideas to you guys and kind of plant the seeds so we can think about it moving forward. This is not in any way, shape, or form a dire thing, but sometimes I will selfishly admit I get a little bit stressed when it comes time for a bill to get paid, and I'm like, okay, I have to go to the Kalamazoo Community Foundation. They just dispersed money 2 days ago, and now I have to wait a month to get the money out. That's not really going to work for me.
Would it be oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is that where O'Connor Fund money comes from?
What?
The Kalamazoo Foundation?
Yep.
What do you think it would be appropriate to take this into like the finance subcommittee work and then?
Please.
I know that I know that we have a meeting next month scheduled already about a different topic, but we could add this possibly, and then maybe we come with a proposal at a future meeting.
I think that would be excellent.
Okay, great.
We might need to talk a little bit offline too.
Yeah.
I just don't want to have to mire our overall conversation, but maybe we can shoot some emails back and forth in the coming days too to understand. I need to look at when we have a budget
Okay.
where I'll be creating the budget because I'm going to bring the budget to you guys as well to get approval, and I just want to make sure that we're falling in line with stuff. So
Yeah, that sounds great.
you guys are doing great with this. You guys are being understanding of this, and we're rolling with the punches, I think, wonderfully. And you guys have pushed me many times to be able to understand the finances, and I think, like I said before, that we are in the firmest control right now that we have been. I don't want to say ever because I don't know what it was like, but we're doing really good right now of understanding, and you guys have really sought understanding on this, and I think we're finally achieving it. So thank you all.
The time frame sticking out to me in my memory from the report from the foundation was like 2 weeks. But I don't know if that's accurate. I'd have to look back. But
Yeah.
once a month could be cumbersome, I suppose, in some of our circumstances.
And that's all that I have for that. So.
And if we do want to change the tide and start making money, then we have to think about creating our own tours or books.
All our spare time.
And you just do the one that you did for the,
Oh yeah, how was your church tour?
It's fine. It's fine.
All right, that brings us to 3, the grant making report submitted by Catherine.
Yes, great. Okay, so as you all know, the grant period opened on March 8th. It closed on May 17th. I wrote here that there were 9 applications filed, but I think it was really 8, right, because of Allen Travel, Amy, right? So 8 applications filed, but that's great because last year we had 1, and now we have 8. So that, I think, is a huge improvement, and I think it speaks to some of the changes that were made in the application process, as well as all the outreach that Luis and others did. So that was exciting. So next date, so June 7th, so last Friday, Luis and Kyle sent the reviewed application and comments to the grant committee. And then now through June 21st, the committee is reviewing all those applications. And then June 21st, the grant committee is going to be meeting and making a decision. And then a week later, we'll notify any successful grant seekers of the award. So that's kind of the next steps here. I'm pretty optimistic about it. I wrote in the report the makeup of the grant making committee because I realize it's probably been some time since we've talked about that. So I can I read that? I'll read that. Okay. So the grant making committee and the non-voting committee members include Luis, Kyle, and newly Kayla has joined that as well, which is great. And then the voting committee members, Pam O'Connor, myself as the KHPC member, Kurt Artema, Maria Perez-Stable, and Nelson Nave. So it's made up of people both inside this commission, myself, as well as people out in the community, and each of those people was selected very intentionally. So we will all meet on the 21st and review all those grants. So, and thank you to Luis and Kyle for all your comments so far, because that was helpful. Any questions on any of that? Okay.
Thank you. If anybody wants to join, it's a public meeting on the 21st in the community room right around the corner. Brings us to F, discussion and action items. Luis put this on here, proposed reimbursement to myself for buying a lot of the food and drink for our ceremony. And then the question becomes, if the commission agrees, where we should pull those funds from.
I'll move to reimburse Chair Hibbard in the amount of $61.92 for the refreshments from the fund held at the city.
Second.
It's 61.98,
What did I say?
61.92. I just want it to be tip top and shit.
I want to short you 6 cents.
I'm not offended.
Amended to 61.98. Thank you, Luis.
And still second.
And then you said if it's from the city fund, then you would need a W-9, which I did bring with me.
Okay.
And it's a money matter, so we need a roll call. And we'll go down the list in order as printed. Kayla?
Yes.
Fred's not here. Myself, I'll abstain. Lene?
Yes.
Patrick?
Yes.
Catherine?
Yes.
Thank you all. Also, if you weren't there, I think it went pretty well. And the video is up if you want to see what Neil put together for all the recipients. Next, we have an interesting proposal that Luis brought up recently, working with EMU on an oral history project.
I didn't write anything because I didn't know what to write. So the last public history roundtable, which is something, I don't know if Lynn actually puts it together, so I hope she doesn't get angry if I say she does. But something that I think Lynn Houghton at Western puts together, where public history folks come together and have an opportunity to share what they're working on. Share, the Society for History and Racial Equity, brought up the fact that they're going to be working on some oral histories. So I guess we'll kind of contain that into one bucket right now and keep it in the back of your head. And then in some of my conversations with some of my colleagues, I know that there were some other oral histories that were being talked about with the African American community here in the city of Kalamazoo, and this is something that we've talked about for a while, it seems. This is very preliminary, what I'm bringing up to you guys right now, because I still need to speak with everything I've reached out to Sharon. I haven't heard back yet, and we need to figure out some of the other things, but when I was working at Eastern Michigan and finishing up my master's, they were working on building a trailer that they have that has a mobile oral history studio in it. That's one component of it. I think the other component of it that really interests me is that they teach an oral history class now, and that was one of my colleagues that I went to school with. So there are kind of two avenues that I was considering. One is they could just bring the trailer down, have people use it. They're done. You know, you get to do your oral histories in this, I will admittedly say, a very cool space, right? You'll have professional grade audio accompanying that. And I think that's kind of the extent of it. Maybe I'm leaving out some other stuff. The other option is that they could come down, and we might need to do this in two portions, but kind of run a clinic on how to do oral histories. I think oral histories, for those of us that might not know, are kind of a fancy academic term for pretty much interviews with folks, and we're talking about the history of individuals' lives. It's one component of it is getting the story from folks. I think a lot of the stuff that people don't think about is there's a lot of, not to use the word a lot of too much, or the phrase, but there are things behind the scenes that we need to consider for the longevity of these and for the use of them to make this a worthwhile practice. Some of those things you need to consider are what are some of the best practices for conducting these questions. If you're going to be interviewing a lot of folks, do you want to have uniformity across those interviews, or do you want to kind of have them all be unique and stuff, you know? We also want to consider the quality of the recordings. Are we getting the best quality we can so in the future people can access them? What file types are we using so people can access them in the future? Not to bore you all, but metadata, how are we going to make this so it's searchable? Some of the other things that I think are more important when we look at them are we having permissions to share them? You cannot just go and interview someone and then post it online, because there's a lot of issues with that. You need to make sure that you have in writing that the people are consenting to this to be posted and be used. Do we have the appropriate copyright statements written on these so we know that they are copyrighted appropriately and people aren't, you know, there's fair use things. And then file retention. Where are these being saved? How are they being saved? How do we know that they're going to have longevity? Where are they going to be hosted? The kind of rough numbers that I got after just preliminarily meeting with my Alexis Braun-Marks, who's the archivist at the Eastern Michigan University, and then Matt Jones, who teaches the oral history classes, is that, and they're going to provide me with a proposal, is that I think the shorter term one that I said to you guys would be under $5,000 for them to come down. For a shortened, and I want to say shortened because, you know, this could potentially be a long project, but for the actual clinic, they said that they probably could get it done for under 10 grand. I think that this is a great opportunity for us to be able to leverage some of the funds that we're having for DEI initiatives. It's an out-of-the-box way to look at things that are preservation. I don't think that this is, again, traditional preservation that we're looking at right now, but it's a way to help people who are already doing this work. Share is already doing this work, and I think that there might be some other groups, and I'm not sure yet, so I don't want to say names of those other groups that are looking to do this work. So it's an opportunity for us to be able to assist them financially, obviously, but not to step on toes and to be able to plug ourselves in. Like, I think that we're mindful of what we need to do into the work of groups of folks who probably you know, are part of the African American community and say, hey, we're willing to help you in this way. We don't want to hijack this project. We want to try to assist you in the best way that we can, which may be plugging you in with some of the contacts that we have and then giving you some financial assistance as well. Again, I'm just bringing this to you guys and talking through it. There's nothing set in stone. We have no proposals. We have no money that's been drawn up yet, but I just wanted to apprise you of it because I thought, and I guess, I mean, I was the one that's coming up with the idea, but I thought that it was a really cool idea in a way that we could help get some wins for ourselves and also help other folks do work and do it in a way that's going to be able to benefit future generations through teaching about the proper processes and some of the lessons learned from Eastern for conducting oral histories.
I think that's great. I think it's a great idea. I think it's like it really fits in well with what we talked a lot about, which is, as you said, kind of like stepping in and helping where we can instead of trying to kind of chart a whole new path. So I think that's great. I wonder, do you know, and I'm sure this will be in the proposal, but what does the processing on their end look like? I hope it's not just like raw audio. Do they do transcriptions? Like, what does the end product from them look like?
So I can share some links with you guys. It's archive level stuff, so you will have transcriptions. I think that figuring out the transcriptions is the one that I want to really pursue more, because we could even then speak with students that have them do the transcriptions, because that's a rather labor-intensive part of it all. Those are the things that they will have in the proposal, but it would look like, you know, the appropriate copyright statement. They would, I believe, help them. They do theirs through SoundCloud, but we could try to help them embed things. Embedding is not tough, but show them how they're getting their licensing, how they're putting it up on SoundCloud. And it's not to say that Share doesn't know how to do this already, but I know that those, I think, are the trickier parts. So putting it up on the internet is kind of the easier part, but I think getting the transcription done, getting the metadata assembled, finding a retention plan is the hard part that I had never considered before I started working in the archive. So I think it'll include all of those things. They have a wonderful series already on Share's website that they worked with Kalamazoo College to do. So I haven't looked at the back end of any of that. I don't know how those videos are hosted, though. I don't know if it's YouTube or some other media player that's just embedded. So hearing them come to the Public History Roundtable and then looking at the website and then thinking about what Eastern has, spawned this for me. I think it would also be an opportunity for some group in Kalamazoo, who knows who it is, to look at the trailer and say, could we recreate this? Could we make a mobile unit for doing oral histories as well? It also, the training is an opportunity to pretty much amass an army of folks that you could get trained in oral histories, and maybe now I could go out and help on a volunteer basis as well. Great knowledge, and I think just a great time to do some collaboration with preserving stories that are always, you have to collect them while the people are still around for these stories too. That's a really important part about oral histories.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. I'm looking forward to seeing the proposal, because I think it's something that we should definitely look into doing.
Thank you.
Sounds like we'll have lots of people to invite so they can observe and learn as well.
Yeah.
Any other commissioner comments on this matter? All right. The next what was this? Discussion and action item is a proposed merger of a grave issue squad with the Friends of Kalamazoo Historic Cemeteries.
I couched this one, I think, as discussion. So I had a meeting with Gary Swain from the Friends of the Kalamazoo Historic Cemeteries, along with Wendy Burlingham, who is, sorry, I don't know Wendy's exact title, but she's in public services, and then Suzanne Rowland, who is one of the people that, like the cemeteries coordinator with the city. I think this came up because I know that we had kind of the email that came through about the event that's going to be happening in August about some of the gravestone repairs, and that kind of made me like, whoa, I don't know what's happening. Gary is doing a lot of this work, and he's doing this work excellently. Lene, do you need some water? Okay, sorry. I wasn't trying to...
Sorry.
No, not a problem at all. Health is always first. Would you like me to wait for the report for you? Okay. Gary is doing an excellent job. He's being able to marshal a lot of people to come and do this work. It's not that we weren't doing a great job, but he has a very wide network of folks that he can call upon to do the cemetery cleanings. I didn't know what term to use, so I thought that merger was the most appropriate. I think that we should allow him to be, and we can do our own if we want, but I think that we should be, in effect, kind of piggybacking off of the work that he's doing for scheduling. We can always offer manpower up to do these people power, I guess, to go out and do the cleanings, right? We can always reach out to our networks. He has a lot of supplies. He has a lot of folks, and they are dedicated solely to this too. So they're able to coordinate with Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts and other communities, and able to reach out to the 48 states tour gravestone cleaning folks, whereas I didn't necessarily felt that I had that capacity. Gary is dedicated to it. So I think this is more of a symbolic thing than it is necessarily a tangible physical thing, but I think that we should start to work much more closely with him and make sure that we are attending all of his workshops, and we are, and I think that we can delegate some of those scheduling responsibilities, as he's already doing them, over to the Friends of the Kalamazoo Historic Cemeteries. As kind of a wrap up to that, when we were talking, he said that his folks were itching to do another gravestone cleaning, so they were looking at June 29th for another gravestone cleaning. So those who are wanting to attend are more than welcome to attend. And that's pretty much all that I have.
Because that was just formed in the last few years, correct?
Yes.
Makes sense to me. Does that mean we get him on our subcommittee, or we can sort of disband that subcommittee, or I guess we can address that in our next planning meeting. But
Yeah, I think we could address that. And if you guys would like Gary to come and kind of speak about the work that he does, he said he was more than willing to come in July. If you'd like Wendy or Suzanne to come and speak about what public service is doing with the cemeteries as well, they said they would also be more than willing to. So if I get a sense that you all would like them to come and give a brief presentation next month, I would certainly reach out to them, and they can do that. So just let me know.
Yeah, I think that sounds great. I mean, I've not been nearly as involved as you have with the cemetery stuff, but I feel like if they're already doing a lot of this work, it makes sense to combine efforts instead of both trying to do it alone. Yeah, I would be interested in knowing more about, kind of what are they working just at Mountain Home? Are they working at other places? What's the frequency of their meetings? How do they get the word out? All that. I mean, I don't know if they need to come to a meeting to tell us that, but even if it was kind of just just more, if they have a website or more information would be great. But yeah, I think it's a great idea.
That was a head shake. No, they don't have a website yet. I think Gary would just be excited to come in and speak too, because he's really passionate. They do gravestone uncovering. He's worked pretty close with the Sons of the Union, I think, to find stones of Civil War vets who don't have gravestones and then prove that they were Civil War vets and get them gravestones from the VA. They have done some, I think, inventories of cemeteries. They do cleanings, obviously, and I think that they do a lot of educational stuff at Riverside and Mountain Home here in the city of Kalamazoo, but I think that they almost have a tri-county reach now where they do stuff. Obviously, we would be focused in Kalamazoo, and I think that we could always be, we can talk more about the ways in which we could support them at future meetings, but I just kind of want to, again, I know there's a lot of floating that I'm doing to you all today, but there's been a lot of exciting things that came up to me in the past month, and I thought that this was a great opportunity for us, again, be able to assist truly and not reinvent the wheel, but find ourselves as a spoke in the wheel that exists with the larger community in the city of Kalamazoo.
So it sounds like we would be interested in hearing from whoever wants to join us.
Okay.
Any other comments on this matter? On to the coordinator's report.
Yes, thank you all again for joining me and your fellow commissioners on this beautiful evening. So there's some written stuff and then there's some not written stuff that I'll talk about. We have the reviews that, I think you guys can all look at and read if you'd like to. 35 total reviews now, 17 have gone to the Historic District Commission, 18 have been done administratively by myself for a total of $1,970 in fees generated. I think we've only had one denial so far this year, and that was a gentleman that wanted to put aluminum over fascia on a property at 802 South Park Street. It's a Craftsman property, and they just didn't feel that wrapping the fascia in aluminum would have, they felt that it would have adversely affected the historic characters of the property. So, in other news, we're looking for obviously commissioners here, and we're looking for commissioners at the Historic District Commission as well. I'm going to do another push with Neil to get the word out about that. So, if you guys know people and you want to reach out, please do so. I think on the more somber note, and I'll be sharing this as well with the Historic District Commission, but there's been a spat of fires recently that have happened in the city of Kalamazoo that have affected some historic resources. 3 properties on Allen Boulevard just to the west of St. A's were demolished. They were all in the Historic District Commission because of a fire that started in the property in the center of those, and I believe that was 121 Allen Boulevard. It spread to the other 2 properties. 117 and 121 were abandoned properties, but the property directly to the north of that did have a family in it who got out okay, so everyone got out unscathed, save 1 cat, but they got the rest of their cats out, and a litter of kittens got out. But the damage was so severe that it needed to be, all 3 properties were demolished on the spot effectively. You can go on Google and look at them. There were some very impressive properties, and that's an impressive area of the city, and it has I hate this turn of phrase, but it has a lot of history. It was where Allen was involved with the Globe Casket Company, kind of laid out that area with Charles Hayes, who was a big developer in Edison, and kind of made some upscale homes in one of the maybe early 20th century suburbs of the city. The day before that, so that fire happened Monday morning at about 4:30. I think Saturday or Sunday there was a fire that happened at on Vine Place, and that also pretty much really hit that property pretty hard too. So there's not really a roof on it anymore. So I wouldn't be surprised if that one gets deemed unsalvageable and goes over my head historically and needs to be demolished as well. Today there was another fire at Walnut Street, and that one was contained within about 45 minutes. So I just wanted to apprise people of that because it was shocking to me to come in this week and see these things, and it's interesting to see and devastating to see fire ravaged buildings. Luckily, no one's been hurt in any of these instances. So that's all that I have for my report.
Thank you. Sad news indeed. Are there any commissioner comments this evening?
Well, just for the June 29th gravestone cleaning, could you send us that information and where?
Yep.
Thank you.
Comments or questions? Last chance. All right, thank you all. Meeting adjourned. Enjoy the weather.